Okay, and we are live. Welcome to another Thursday, 8:30 every week. We are together. Hey, please use this opportunity right now to share it with your friends, your family, your coworkers. You know someone who might need this. In fact, all of us need this because here at Abundant Marriage, we are creating a community of marriages who want a little more, who want better, who know, you know what? Jesus didn't die on the cross so that I could have a mediocre marriage. Here at Abundant Marriage, we prioritize family because we know family is a blessing and a gift from God that when lived the way that God has called us to live, that our families will not only be a vehicle of transformation used to change us, but to change our children, to change our community, our churches, and the world. So families is what we are all about here at Abundant Marriage. So the question that I sometimes get asked quite frequently is, did I marry the wrong person? And we're going to wrestle with this question because I'm sure that some of you, if not all of you, have asked yourself that question in some period in your life. Did I marry the wrong person? I mean, I'm guilty of it, right? And here's the thing, I don't want you to feel bad about it or say, oh, I've never thought about that. Surely, whether it was because you were frustrated, whether because your needs weren't met, whether you didn't feel like a priority, there are times where we start to question, where we're wrestling. Maybe it's a doubt, maybe for whatever reason we're feeling a little vulnerable and we ask ourselves, oh, did I marry the wrong person? And if that's the question you've asked yourself before, welcome to the club. And if you haven't, get ready because you might. I don't know if it's when your kids come, when a new job, a new place, who knows? Whenever life starts to throw us into new transitions or a new normal, we will ask the question. I know, especially in especially in this time where we're home more with each other. At least some of the couples in Abundant Marriage have asked, did I marry the wrong person? And so, if that's some of the thoughts that you're having, it's okay. Welcome to the club, as I said. And for whatever reason, if those thoughts are coming because you don't feel supported, because you feel disrespected, because you feel unloved, or you feel like you're not a priority, or maybe it's because you're constantly fighting over and over and over again about the same things and you seem to never be able to just get through it. Maybe you don't feel supported. Maybe you feel like you're doing more for this relationship than your spouse. And maybe you've already been wrestling with this question for a very long time. And maybe you've already taken drastic measures, like at a friend's house. Maybe you've moved out. Maybe you're contemplating. Maybe you're thinking of divorce and it's something you've never thought you were going to be thinking about. For whatever reason that you've thought about this question, did I marry the wrong person? Today we are together, and as a family here in Abundant Marriage, we want to find real answers to give peace to your aching heart. And so I understand it. I understand these thoughts. I've wrestled with them myself. And what is going to make all the difference is not that we're having these thoughts, but what we choose to do with these thoughts. I have found with spending a lot of times with the couples in Abundant Marriage and sort of using them almost as guinea pigs and seeing what works for them, what doesn't work for them, how they go through conflict, and what they do when they wrestle with this question. Using my own example and their examples and countless of other couples, I've found that there are three things people usually do as they wrestle with, did I marry the wrong person? And maybe you are going to say, oh my goodness, Amanda, that's exactly what I've been doing. So first I'm going to show you sort of what we're doing, but what is not helpful. And then I'm going to give you 7 ways, 7 tips, 7 better things that you can do. Now, you don't have to do all 7 of them, but this week, try to apply 1, 2, maybe 3 of them to your current situation and see if it helps. And here's the beauty about these recordings, right? They stay recorded. So write it down so that you can have it as part of your notes, look back into it, or just re-watch this video and apply the other tips, because I am certain they're going to work for you, because they've already worked for the countless couples in abundant marriage. And so, currently, with these thoughts, you are probably doing three things. It's three sort of groups that spouses who have this "did I marry the wrong person" question, this doubt, when they're wrestling with it, these are the three groups that they typically fall into. The first group is the group that wants to announce it, to put it abroad. And so what they do is they call their friends and they tell their coworkers and they say, "I married the wrong person." And then they go on to talk I don't want to say the word. They go on to talk bad. You know the word that I want to say. They go on to talk bad about their spouse. And remember, if you've been accompanying us, you know that this is a form of betrayal, right? And it ruins trust in the relationship. But maybe you're in this group. Maybe you're in the group that you call someone, a friend, to talk bad about your spouse and say, "I can't live with this crazy man anymore. I don't know what to do with this woman anymore. I think I married the wrong person." And depending on who you tell, this person is going to tell you not what you need to hear, but what you want to hear. I was talking to a husband the other day, and he said that a friend called him and told him something. "Hey, I need your help. I need your advice." And because this husband gave the friend the advice that he did not want to hear, but that he needed, he says, "Oh man, I thought you were my friend. I thought I could count on you. I thought I could rely on you." And why? Because usually when we call our friends, we want them to be on our side. And so that's why we go. However, this isn't the best thing to do, because truly your mom or your dad, they're going to maybe have a biased approach towards you. The true friends, the real friends, are the ones who tell you what you don't want to hear, but what you need to hear. Make sure you are surrounding yourself with people who are for your marriage. I'm going to tell you right now, with no mercy, that if you have people in your life that are against your marriage, that are against your wife or against your husband, you have no business being around those people. You want people in your life that are going to encourage your marriage, that are going to support your marriage, that are going to cheer you on in your marriage. Why? Because marriage is a blessing. Marriage is a gift given to us by God. Now, maybe you're in the second group. In this second group, they sort of victimize themselves. They say things like, "This is never going to change. I do everything. There's nothing wrong with me. If only my husband did this. If only my wife did it, then we would never even be in this situation. I don't know what to do anymore. I've already prayed. I've fasted. I've gone to the prayer groups. I've done everything I could, and nothing works." This is the group that victimizes themselves. This group, instead of focusing on the things that they can control, they love to focus on the things that they cannot control. I recently had a client, and she's struggling with this whole school stuff. And she's a perfectionist, and so she has her life just very much in a timeline that she wants to meet. And when she doesn't meet these timelines, it's like it just ruins her day, right? And so she says, "Listen, Amanda, I need to finish school in 2 years." And I said, "Well, that's a great goal to have, but we need to be flexible." She says, "What do you mean I have to finish in 2 years? Because in 2 years, I'm going to be this age, and then in this age, I'm going to have kids, and then in this..." And so her life is all planned and prepared, and that's a good thing. It's good for us to have goals and dreams and aspirations, but we need to also be flexible within those dreams and within those goals. Why? Because we're going to go around being the most frustrated people ever. And here's the thing. Sometimes you think it's the best way, but as the Bible says, the ways of a man seems right, but it's the way of death. Or, a man makes plans, but the Lord determines his steps. And who knows if God has to make you go through another year, or maybe school instead of 2 years is going to take 3 years, but God knows all things, and our plans need to be in his hands. Well, she was frustrated with the 2 years. Said, "Listen, you can't control the things that might come up in the 2 years. Who knows if you're even going to be able to do 2 years, because you might have to do extra extra classes, or you might have to do an internship. You don't know. So what are the things that you can control? Oh, I can control signing up to classes. I can control doing my best in all the classes that I go to. So those who feel like they are victimizing themselves, instead of focusing on all the things you can't control, for example, you cannot change your spouse. You have no control over that. But you know what you can change? You can change yourself. In fact, you can allow for God to change you. So if you fall in that group, there's an answer, there's a tip that's going to help you out. And finally, the last group, these are those that become reactive instead of proactive. There's a great little book. I've shared it with you guys before. So the bigger book, it's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And there's a bigger book. This one is actually the workbook, and it has activities. I love using this book. And I want to read something here verbatim because Stephen Covey talks a lot about habit formation. And one of them, which is the first one, he talks about us having personal victories and private victories before we have public victory. That makes sense, right? Oftentimes we quickly want to rush public victories. We want the applauses, we want the fireworks, but really it's the small everyday victories of dying to self and working on self, the victories that no one sees but you and God, that sort of prepares the stage so that you can have these public victories. So the first habit, which I love, is focusing on private victories. And this one talks about being proactive. So I'm going to read it to you verbatim because honestly, I can't say it better myself. He says this: be proactive is about taking responsibility for your life. I love that. So remember the group number 2, where they are the victim, where they're I've tried to change my husband. I've tried to change my wife. That's the problem. You're focusing on something that you cannot control instead of focusing all of your energy and your efforts on the things you can control, like yourself, or like my client, on signing up for the classes, showing up with your best self, and having the goal of 2 years, but being flexible in the timing of God. So he continues and says this: you can't keep blaming everything on your parents or grandparents or your boss or your coworkers. Now, can you? He asked. Is your terrible childhood or genetics or work environment controlling your life? Or how about growing up poor? That's a great excuse for all your problems, isn't it? We do have the freedom to choose. All of us do. This is what being proactive is all about. It's not minimizing your suffering, your hurt, your traumas, or your pain, but it's saying I'm no longer going to be a victim. I am going to roll up my sleeve, and with the help of God, I am going to have victory over these things. Look at what it says. Proactive people recognize that they are responsible, that they don't blame circumstances, conditions, or conditioning for their behavior. They know that they choose their behavior. And when we know that we choose our behavior, now we're no longer the victim, but now we are the proactive doers of our life. Now we are the survivors. Look at what it says. Reactive people, on the other hand, are often affected by their physical environment. If the weather is good, they feel good. If it isn't, it affects their attitude and performance. And then he ends with this quote. He says this: until we know ourselves and are aware of ourselves as separate from others and from the environment, meaning that just because your husband is in a bad mood does not mean that you need to be in a bad mood. Just because it's raining outside or the weather is thundering does not mean it needs to affect your mood. He continues, until we can be separated even from ourselves, that we can observe our own tendencies, thoughts, and desires, we have no foundation from which to know and respect other people, let alone create change within ourselves. So here's the thing. Every stimulus every stimulus, something that happens, we then have the freedom to choose how we will respond. And the reason we know that that is possible is because if a bunch of us got onto a plane and the pilot says, open the doors, we're all going to jump. The backpacks that are all on your backs, well, it's actually parachute. So let's go, everyone jump. This is a stimulus, okay? Now, I can assure you that if there are 50 people on that airplane, that they will all have different reactions. Some of them will be excited. Some of them will be scared. Some of them will be nervous. Some of them might throw up. Here's the thing. There's one stimulus, but then everyone has the freedom to choose their reaction upon the stimulus. This is what being proactive is all about. It's not negating, it's not lessening the pain, the suffering, or the circumstances, but it's saying, I am going to choose how I will respond to something that is out of my control. Okay? But don't feel bad. This is the place where change happens. This is the place where the group of people in this place, the group of marriages, the husbands and the wives here at Abundant Marriage, they know that they need to start thinking differently, acting differently, wanting different, surrounding themselves with different people so that we can go after an abundant marriage and happy families. So again, if you need to rewatch this, do that. But, as I've said before, grab your papers, grab your pens, and take notes. Also, use this time right now if you're watching, you're thinking, okay, it's about to get started, okay? So make sure your family, your friends, you know that coworker that you just talked bad about your husband to? Send it to her. Send it to him. You know that friend that you were talking to and you were being a victim in front of? Send it. Right now, use this last opportunity before I'm going to give you a few seconds so that you don't miss it. Send it to your friends on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever it is you are watching. I would greatly appreciate it. Okay, so here we go. All right, Amanda. The question is, did I marry the wrong person? Now, that question is not the root of the problem, it's the symptom of the problem. The root of the problem is that today we are going to figure out how we can become in control. We are not going to be a victim, but we are going to control our thoughts so that we can be more proactive people. Now, before I get in there, I want to open this parenthesis and say this. When I say, did I marry the wrong person, oftentimes it's the everyday I fell out of love. It's the everyday I'm so frustrated with my husband because he's sloppy or because he's messy. I in no shape or form am talking about abuse. Okay? Oftentimes we are married with abusive people, whether it's physically, emotionally, mentally. We are married with people that are cheating, that are unfaithful, that have promised to change and are not changing. So if this is the case, you need to seek professional help. Send me a private message, send me a DM so that you can get the steps necessary for this specific situation. Because I'm going to tell you right now, God does not want you to be in a relationship that pushes you away from Him. Marriage is something serious. And for those of you who are not married and are watching, choose carefully and choose wisely, because marriage is supposed to be a covenant, and a covenant should not be broken, which is why if you are married, obviously I'm going to try to do everything in my power to help you stay married, and that means changes on both sides. If you are dating and you start seeing these things, break up if you have to, but do not get married without being certain that this is the person that is going to lead you to your destiny, and that destiny is heaven. But now, if not for abuse, if not for hitting and cheating and affairs and this and that, use these 7 tools to change your thoughts, because the better question is not, did I marry the wrong person, but what thoughts am I having that instead of helping me be proactive, it's only making me reactive, only making me focus on the things I cannot control instead of focusing on the things that I can control. So here's the first one. Number one, if you are in the group of feeling like you are a victim of your current situation, I want you to remember this. Thoughts repeated become thoughts ingrained. thoughts repeated become thoughts ingrained. Or you can think about it like this. Thoughts repeated become fixed. They become part of your brain. They become a neural pathway. So to change your thoughts, you must change your focus. To change your thoughts, don't keep thinking about all the things you can't control, but find the things that you can control. Now, there's a story in the Bible. You know it. It's the story of David and Goliath. Long story short, the Israelites, they were being harassed by the Philistines, and the Philistines wanted to attack the children of Israel. And they had a fighter, a well-known soldier named Goliath. He was tall, he was strong, he was scary. And day in and day out, he would mock God. He would call out the Israelites and he would say, is there not a man in the Israelite camp that will come and fight with me? And day in and day out, he would show up in that field and he would call them out, yet no one was willing to fight Goliath. Well, David, the shepherd boy, he strolls on the camp and he hears the shouts of Goliath. He hears God being mocked and he says, is no one going to fight that uncircumcised Philistine who keeps talking poorly about our God? Is no one going to stand up to him? And the Israelites, the soldiers, are saying, no one's going to do it. And so here's the thing. Look at what happens. Go to 1 Samuel 17. 1 Samuel 17. And the story is fascinating. 1 Samuel 17. Look at what it says. We're not going to read it in its entirety. So if you don't know the story well, or if you want to remind yourself, go on and read it because it's incredible. And so David goes back and forth with, and his brothers even get upset because they think that he's being cocky and arrogant. And he's like, I'm not being cocky and arrogant. He says, I just know who I serve. So listen carefully. The Israelites, they were scared. They made themselves a victim because they were focusing on the problem. They were focusing on Goliath. But David, he does something different. He focuses on the problem solver. He focuses on God. He focuses on not what he cannot do, but in who he serves and in what he can do. And so look, it's incredible. It says this. We'll pick it up in verse, let's see. We'll pick it up in verse 45. And so it says this. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me. Now he's already in battle. Okay, he's about to go against Goliath. King Saul asked David, hey, do you want to borrow my gear? And he's like, I'm not going to borrow your gear. And he recalls the times that he was taking care of his sheep and that he killed a bear and he killed a lion, not because of the strength of his biceps, but because of the strength of his faith. And so he goes up to Goliath and he says this. Oh, I'm gonna start in verse 43 just because it's funny. So look at this. So the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods, lowercase g. And the Philistine said to David, come to me and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. David wasn't being cocky. It was because David wasn't focused on Goliath. David was focused on his God. Then it says, then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin. This is where the Israelites were focused on. This is a big guy. He has big weapons, and he can kill us. But I come to you. Look at how David is coming. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Look, he didn't take it personal. You're not talking about me. You're not mocking me. You're not defying me. You're defying the living God. And for his name's sake, he is going to use me. And look at what it says. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcass of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into my hands. Well, long story short, David, he gets those stones, and with his slingshot, he starts to I was about to say it in Portuguese. The Reverend Reed, the song is Giro, Giro, Giro. He starts to fling that slingshot over his head, and sure enough, he throws it. That stone is going in the air. Goliath removes his helmet temporarily, and it hits him right smack, strikes him right on the forehead. When he falls to the ground, David runs over with a sword that's heavier than his frail, skinny little body, and he slices off the head of Goliath. You see, David understood that thoughts repeated becomes thoughts ingrained, and the Israelites, they were scared to death because they kept thinking, we can't do this. He's bigger, he's stronger, he has better weapons. But David changed his thoughts by changing his focus. All right, let's go to number two. Number two, if you're in the group of calling your friends, families, and coworkers and talking poorly about your spouse, then this one is for you. We cannot accept every thought that comes into our mind simply because it came into our mind. Just because a thought goes through your mind, just because a negative thought goes through your mind, a negative thought such as, did I marry the wrong person? Just because that thought goes through your mind does not make that thought a reality, does not make it real, does not make it truth. We need to start questioning our thoughts and not accepting every thought that comes into our mind. I mean, come on. And the best story that I can think about that is Abraham. You know, Abraham, he was asked by God to do a very, very difficult thing, which was to sacrifice at the altar his only son, his beloved son, Isaac. And in that journey, the journey of 3 days was how long it took for Abraham to go from the tent, which was his home, to the mountain, which God requested, where he was going to sacrifice Isaac. It took him 3 days. Do you not think that in those 3 days, imagine the thoughts, the doubts, the questions that went through Abraham's mind? Questions of, could it be that God would actually ask you to do this, Abraham? Doesn't the Bible say, thou shalt not kill? Why would God ask you to kill? Are you sure, Abraham, that God is the one asking you? You know how many times Satan had the opportunity to torment Abraham by his thoughts? Well, I love a quote from a woman named E.G.W. And look at what she says. That day, the longest that Abraham had ever experienced, dragged slowly to its close. While his son and young men were sleeping, he spent the night in prayer, still hoping that some heavenly messenger might come to him and say the trial was enough. In other words, Abraham was wrestling with God in prayer, pleading and praying that a heavenly angel would show up to him and say, hey, Abraham, the trial has gone long enough. God has seen that, you know, you're on your way to sacrifice your son, but the trial is over. You've done your part. God has tested your faithfulness, A+. But look at what it says. But no relief came to his tortured soul. Another long day, another night of prayer. While ever the command was to leave him childless was ringing in his ear. Satan, look at this part, Satan was now near to whisper doubts and unbelief, but Abraham resisted his suggestions. It doesn't say that Abraham didn't have doubt, that he didn't have questions, but he resisted, meaning he wasn't reactive, he was being proactive. He wasn't just being a puppet where Satan could have him think any sort of thoughts, but while the thoughts came, while the doubts came, Abraham resisted. Now the question is, well, how? because he didn't accept every thought that came to his mind as reality. Look at this. As they were about to begin the journey of the third day, the patriarch Abraham saw the promised sign, a cloud of glory hovering over Mount Moriah, and he knew that the voice which was spoken was from heaven, meaning that he knew that this was the wish of God, the desire of God. He knew that he must go forward. But even now, Abraham does not murmur against God. But you know what Abraham does? Abraham strengthens his soul by dwelling on the evidences of the past of God's goodness and his faithfulness. Let me tell you something in your marriage right now. I don't know what's going on in your marriage, but there will be times in your marriage that you will have reason to doubt God's plans. But when you look to the cross, you will never have reason to doubt his goodness. When you read the Bible and you read it and what it says about marriage, that marriage is sacred, that marriage is holy, that marriage is a covenant, that it's a commitment that you've made not only to your spouse, but that you made to God, that you would not defile it, that you would honor this woman, that you would honor this man, that you would love them with an unconditional love, that it would be steadfast, that it would be unmoving, unchangeable, that you would allow marriage. Could it be that God made marriage as a video we've already done? Could it be that God is using marriage not for your happiness, but for your holiness? And it doesn't mean that God does not want your happiness, but you know what? Happiness is achieved through holiness. Oh, God wants to do something incredible in your marriage. And in order for him to do that, you cannot accept every thought. You cannot allow for the doubts to stay in your mind. You cannot accept that as reality, as truth, just because you've had a thought. No. Question those thoughts. Hand those doubts over to God. Do not murmur against God, but strengthen yourself by reminding yourself of the faithfulness, of the promises, and of the goodness of God. Look beyond to the unseen promises. This is what faith is all about. The Bible defines faith as the substance of things hoped for and the evidences of things not yet seen. Strengthen yourself in the promises of God. And that's exactly what Abraham did. And that is what strengthened Abraham. And you know what's something amazing about Abraham? When Abraham received the commandment of God, you know what he doesn't do? He didn't go complain about it to his friend. He didn't go call up his dad. You know what he also doesn't do? He didn't even go tell Sarah. You know why? Because he knew that Sarah would convince him otherwise. Are there friends in your life? Are there family in your life that are giving you bad advice? That are saying, just leave. Get a divorce. Leave that man. Leave that woman. They're never going to change. This is not coming from God. This is coming by Satan. I'm not saying that these people are Satan. But I'm saying that all of us, me included, we can be used by Satan if we are not careful. Abraham doesn't even go and tell Sarah. You know why? Because the command was given to him from God to him and no one else. And he knew that the heart of a mother would have never allowed him to go forward with this. But his loyalty was to God first. His loyalty was to God first. So don't take your doubts, don't take your frustrations to anyone else but to God first. Seek help from a professional, from an unbiased opinion. Take your questions there, take them to God. So now look at number 3. So the first one was this. The first one is this. Thoughts repeated become thoughts ingrained. So change your thoughts by changing your focus. Number 2, don't accept every thought as truth, as reality, just because you're thinking about it. And here then comes number 3. You have to replace old thoughts with new thoughts. Open your Bible to Matthew 12. Matthew 12. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Matthew 12. I've shared this story before, I believe, with you guys, but it's worth reading it again. It's so short. It's only 3 verses. Replace old thoughts with new thoughts. Let me tell you something. Every empty place is going to be filled with something. Every empty place is going to be filled with something. If your mind is empty, it's going to be filled. The Christian belief, Christianity is not about ridding ourselves of all of our thoughts and looking deep within. No, it's about filling our thoughts with the Word of God. So whatever is empty needs to be filled. Look, here is a story that Jesus tells that will make it all make sense. So look at this. Matthew 12, beginning in verse 43. When an unclean spirit goes out of a man, he goes through dry places seeking rest and finds none. So imagine a man was possessed. Now this man was unpossessed, right? God released him of those demons. And the demons now are trying to find a new place to make their home in. And guess what kind of place? He's going to try to find an empty place so that he can fill it with something, that something being himself. Then he says, I will return to my house from which I came. So he's like, he hasn't found any place to fill. He hasn't found any empty place, so he's going to go back to the place where he came from to see if he can once again reside. And look at what it says. And when he comes, he finds it empty, swept, and put in order. Then he goes and takes with him 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter and dwell there, and the last state of that man is worse than the first. So look, oftentimes when I read this story, I don't understand. Why does the demon come back with 7 more if the house is clean, swept, and put in order? Isn't that a good thing? Remember, empty places will be filled. Your house cannot simply be clean, swept, and put in order. It needs to be clean, swept, put in order, and then filled with the promises of God, filled with the furniture of God, filled with the weapons of the Spirit, with the sword of faith, with the breastplate of righteousness, with the helmet of salvation, with the feet of the gospel of peace. We need to fill. So whenever God removes something from your life, whenever a bad habit has been removed, you need to replace it with a good habit. You know, there's many times clients of mine who suffer with addiction, be it alcohol, be it pornography, whatever, be it with drugs. Those bad habits take a lot of time, a lot of energy. Not only that, but those bad habits also create a group of people who you do that bad habit with. And so when those bad habits are removed, you need to replace it with good habits. So maybe we're going to remove alcohol and replace it with community service. Maybe we're going to remove pornography and we're going to replace it with exercise. Maybe we're going to remove all those friends that were taking you down a bad path and we're going to replace it with good friends who now are like-minded in you after the goal or the purpose of a healthier lifestyle. Whatever is empty is going to be filled. So remember, if you have bad thoughts, they're old thoughts, it needs to be replaced with new thoughts. So look, tip number 1 were for those who were struggling with what? Tip number 1 are for those who are struggling with victimization. Tip number 2 were for those who were calling friends, family, co-workers to talk poorly about your spouse. Well, tips 3 to 7 are for those who want to be proactive. And I hope that's you because I know that that's me. I'm not going to tell you that I've never struggled with that question, with that doubt. But I don't want to be reactive to my thoughts. I want to be proactive with my thoughts. I don't want to be a victim. No. I want to be an agent of transformation in my marriage. So here's number 4. Think about your thinking. As soon as those thoughts come, you're not going to accept them as reality simply because you had them. When you have them and they're not good, you're going to replace them with the good. That's number 3. And number 4, you need to start thinking about your thinking and thinking, why am I having these thoughts? Now, when you start thinking about your thinking, you're going to go to number 5, which is this. Thoughts lead to actions. You've heard me say that so many times. Thoughts lead to actions. Actions lead to habits. And habits, a series of them, accumulation of them, whether good or bad, form your character. So if you don't like your character, if you don't like the person that stares back at you in the mirror, you have to change your thoughts. Now, the belief was that it was a very linear concept, that thoughts would lead to actions. However, not only do thoughts lead to actions, but actions lead to thoughts. So you don't have to feel happy to act on happiness. You don't have to feel grateful to write in your gratitude journal. Brene Brown, a researcher on vulnerability, on shame, on gratitude, she found that it is not joyful people who are grateful, but it is grateful people who have joy, meaning that the action of gratitude leads to joyful thoughts. I had a wife who went through abundant marriage, who wanted out of her marriage. She was sick and tired of her husband, and she had to do all these things that she didn't feel like doing. And in the end of the 84 days, in the end of the course, you know what she said? Amanda, I didn't feel like doing half of the things I did. I didn't want to do those things. I didn't feel like doing those things. My husband didn't deserve that I did those things for him. But I found, Amanda, that actions lead to thoughts, and that when I did the things I did not want to do, that when I offered forgiveness, when I was grateful, when I went on that date even though I didn't want to do it, when I had the conversations I didn't want to have, when I was willing to be vulnerable, well, something amazing happened. Thoughts of goodwill towards my husband happened. Thoughts of joy, thoughts of hope, thoughts of I can do this, thoughts of I am falling in love with this man all over again. You don't have to feel like doing something to do it because you know that it is the right thing to do. Number 6, if you want God to change your thoughts, ask Him to change your lifestyle. It is your responsibility to make sure that your brain is functioning at its highest capacity. You're not going to put water into your car and think it's gas. You're going to put gasoline into your car so that it functions at its best. I know Renee is a stickler when it comes to that. Renee doesn't put cheap gas into his car. He puts the best gas into his car because he wants to make sure that the engine maintains its integrity, its function, it's doing what it's supposed to do. Don't put cheap things into your body because then you're going to have cheap thoughts. And so I want you to write this down. Mark Finley, in his sermon, Guard Your Thoughts, he talks about the 4 S's of sour thoughts, meaning these 4 S's are going to produce in you bad thoughts. And remember, the question is, did I marry the wrong person? That is simply the symptom. The root is what is going on with your thoughts. But today, we are not going to become a victim or puppets of our thoughts. We are not going to allow Satan to play sport with our thoughts. We are going to be proactive. We are going to choose our thoughts. We are going to think about our thinking. And when thoughts come in that we don't want them there, we're not going to focus on them. We are going to change our thoughts. Because remember, thoughts that are thought about over and over and over again become ingrained. We don't want to do that. So instead, we are going to ask God to change our lifestyle, and we have to look at the 4 S's of sour thoughts. What are those? Too much sugar, too much stress, too little sleep, and too little exercise, sedentary. Okay? If you are not working out, if you are not sleeping well, if you are eating too much sugar, and if you have too much stress, you are paving the way for sour thoughts. You know what? In a book called Spark, written by a Harvard professor, he says that exercise is the greatest antidepressant there ever was. Don't exercise for biceps, which sure, biceps will look nice. Don't exercise for abs, which that's nice also, but that's just a cherry on top. You exercise for mental health. You exercise so that you do not have to have sour thoughts. And look, Renee, I'm really good on time. I promised them I was going to end early, and I'm finally going to keep my promise. Here's the last one. Here's number 7. You have to put a screen around your mind. You have to put a screen around your mind. Your thoughts come to you because of the avenues of your soul. What you listen to, what you read, what you watch, what you eat. What are the 5 avenues of the soul, your 5 senses? You need to make sure that you are choosing what you allow to come in, because whatever you allow to come in will also come out. Go quickly to Philippians 4. Philippians 4, it's in the New Testament in the end there. Let's make sure I don't, here it is. Philippians 4 verse 8. This is going to be the filter of what you allow to come into your mind. Philippians 4 verse 8 says this. Look, this is Paul speaking, and this is what he says. Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate or think about these things. If it is not these things, then get rid of it. If it does not honor God, if it is not truth, honorable, praiseworthy, you need to allow for the things that you are letting inside the avenues of your soul be filtered through Philippians 4:8. When you think, should I watch pornography? Put it up against the test. And the answer is going to be no. Should I talk poorly about my wife to my coworker? Put it up against these tests. The answer is no. Should I be having these thoughts? Put it up against the test of Philippians 4:8. If it does not pass that test, then get rid of it. How do you get rid of it? Replace old thoughts with good thoughts and go through the 7 steps. So remember, don't be a victim. Don't talk poorly about your spouse to all the different friends and family. Find someone who's actually going to help you, not who's just going to tell you what you want to hear. Find someone who's going to tell you what you need to hear. And finally, no more being reactive. We are going to be proactive. So the question is, did I marry the wrong person? I'm sure you've asked yourself this before. I have. Everyone has. But when that question comes in, and it might, and if it hasn't, it will, then what do? When the thought comes in, use one of these 7 tips that you now know to guard your thoughts, because that is simply a symptom. Go after the root. You are responsible for the integrity of your thoughts. All right, guys, I hope that was helpful to you. And if it was, please share, because you know what it is. Here at Abundant Marriage, we want to attract like-minded people. And what are these like-minded people all about? It's not perfect people. It's not perfect marriage. It's not perfect husbands and perfect wives. No. But it's people that understand that marriage is awesome, that marriage is holy, that it's not easy. You know what? It's easy to have a mediocre marriage. It's hard to have an abundant marriage. But here at Abundant Marriage, we are not after easy. We are after obeying God's commandments, whatever it may be, knowing that the bridge, the pathway to happiness is going through holiness. And so I'll see you guys next time, next week, Thursday, 8:30 p.m. Have a good night. I think Renee pressed pause there on Facebook or something, but I think I'm still on Instagram, right? I'm still on Instagram. So if you're still on Instagram, I was thinking about the next live being this, and let me know what you guys think. So it's really interesting that 2 husbands actually asked me the same question in like a period of less than a month from each other. And the question is this: Amanda, my wife gets really upset when I work on weekends, and I need to work on weekend because I need to provide for the family. We don't have money where I could just be home every weekend. What can I do? Because she gets angry at me about working on weekends, but I do it for the family. I'm doing it for us. So what advice would you give me? Is this something that you're struggling with? Is this a question that you're interested in having answered? If so, let me know. Send me a DM or give me a thumbs up. The question can also be, Amanda, I really want to hang out with my friends and spend time with my friends. I don't always want to hang out with my wife, or wives, I don't always want to hang out with my husband. But it seems like my wife is very insecure that I can't do anything without it being with her. Is this a question that you have? We can answer it here shortly in the next live that we have. So if you have any question that is similar to that one, send it my way so that we can answer it. All right, guys, that's it. See you later.